Hello, Frugal Force. Once again, this is Captain Frugal reporting for duty. And I know some of us are struggling looking for some good comic books to read, especially with maybe Marvel not making us real happy right now, and maybe some of our DC books. So one of the things I like to do when I find my pull list is shrinking is I go back to the back issue bins. I complete series that I have some of that I didn't ever have the full complete series, and I dive in and read what I missed in the past. So I'm using that until hopefully the time of the future, in the future sometime, that the books get better. But until then, I'm going to read some of this more of the back issues and enjoy them for what I can. And this is sort of a different kind of video, a retro review, if you will, a flashback, going back into time, or taking another step into our past. And we're going to look at the original G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero series by Marvel Comics. Now, G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero is a comic book that was published by Marvel Comics from 1982 to 1994. Now, this series had 155 issues. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, it was farther than that. Well, the Marvel segment of that went to 155 issues, and then it was canceled in 1994. It later on was picked up again by IDW, and they continued the numbering and the continuity of the original series, so they didn't reboot it. Now, they did make some differences and some changes, but it wasn't rebooted. Now, the interesting thing about this is the G.I. Joe comic book was made to sell toys. And usually, you think about something, a comic book that's going to be made to sell toys. How long is it really going to last? So that shows you something special about this series. Now, this series that was written by primarily Larry Hama, but it had a couple other writers here and there. But Larry Hama did the majority of them. Herb Trimpe, I'm terrible with names. Stephen Grant, Eric Fian, I believe it was, and Peter Quinones. And it had quite a few different pencilers as well, including Herb Trimpe as well. Don Perlin, Mike Vosberg, Larry Hama, Russ Heath. There was quite a few people involved in the penciling and the inking. And I will say the artwork in the book was pretty solid most of the way through. It did have a couple weird dips here and there where the quality wasn't quite as high. And those I tend to think were more of like a fill-in issue, and maybe some that maybe Larry Hama and things didn't want to do. Now, I believe in always being fair and treating books good, too. This is a time where Larry Hama, I think it's before he went off the deep end of being an SJW. Because currently, you might think, well, is this going to be a fair, objective look? And it absolutely is. It's a shame that Larry Hama is now to the point that he is, that he has to say, that he dislikes people like me, I guess, because of my political beliefs or my views about comic books in general. But looking back, G.I. Joe was a comic book that was separate than the television series. They didn't have the same exact continuity as well. The cartoon series was good, but the comic series was darker. It had it was much more violent. It could show a lot of stuff that they couldn't do in the cartoon. But it was a great vehicle to advertise the toys. As I said, most of it was written by Larry Hama, and I think he likes certain characters more than others, because he had to create and keep throwing in other characters as they wanted him to support more toys. And I think you could see that when these characters maybe only were in the book once or twice, had a couple scenes, and that's it. Whereas the core characters, the ones I think they tend to like more, you've seen a lot more of. For example, you've seen Sergeant Slaughter in one issue, and really, he wasn't relevant to the story at all. Whereas you see characters like Duke, Stalker, Hawk, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Rock and Roll. Characters like that a lot more frequent. Baroness, Destro. So, a great group. This comic book series has a great cast of characters. This could have been a one-note, very generic comic book series, but it wasn't. It actually had a lot of depth. Each character had their own unique characteristics. He put a lot of time into this, even on the toys, because Larry Hama wrote those cards on the back of the toys that told about those characters. So they had a lot of background history in here. Now, the G.I. Joe team consistently battled against the Cobra team as well. Cobra, which is an evil terrorist organization. And they were the primary really the antagonist in the book. You did see several others, but really they were the main ones. And as I said, this was made to support the 1980s Hasbro toy line, which was in response to Kenner's Star Wars action figures. Now, as I said, it wasn't one note, though. Here's the thing. We had lots of different kinds of stories. You had your traditional army battle stories. We had stories that were all-out action with boots on the ground. We had stories that were with lots of machines and tanks and things. Granted, sell toys too, but fighting away constantly. We also had tales of being spies. We had tales of ninjas. A lot of different things that made this an interesting series that kept making you want to read the next. One thing I can say is when you know a series is good, you don't just read the issue and like it. You want to read the next issue. And I think this story, this series had a lot of stories that made you want to do that. Now, I will say there was a couple duds in this series too, and a couple things that were negatives. For one, I think the time where it started getting about the toxic sludge and stuff that was used as a weapon and things like that, those were the artwork in that particular storyline wasn't the greatest, and the story was pretty weak too. Those were clearly looked like a stretch for trying to sell those toys. Another thing we've seen a lot too was a mind control machine in a way from Dr. Venom, then later on Dr. Mindbender tweaked it, and I think it was just overused too much. With being able to use it for mind control and tweaking, though I will say they did it in a somewhat interesting a way. It wasn't always like they were a zombie and did everything they were told. There was issues with it, so that was okay. And later on in the next, when IDW picks it up, that becomes a storyline too as well. But I think it was beaten down a little bit and used a little bit too much. Could have used a little less of that. But another, as I said, there's a difference between the comic books and the cartoons. There was a lot more violence. There was more depth to the comic book. I'm not saying anything bad about the cartoons. I enjoyed them. But the comic book, you had violence. You had people getting shot. You had people getting blown up. And there was repercussions for actions in this book. One of the key times in this book was issue 109 and 110. And 109 had a body count of 7 and climbing. What they meant by that is there was casualties. There were 7 Joes that died in this issue. It started with Tomax and Zaymont misinterpreted Cobra Commander's order to release captured Joes, which I don't know how this was interpreted that way.
Calamity most foul! Ah! No, no, no! Your selfish bungling has permitted the Joes to undo my exquisite pyramid of darkness! You twin twaps! I'm back in command now!
Berserker, Crazy Legs, Quick Kick. You know, all these were Joes that I think that maybe Larry Hama didn't really care for a whole lot. Maybe he thought there was enough of other characters. But then again, I would assume he liked Doc, because Doc was one of the beginning ones. But maybe it was just to make sure that the comic series had gravity. And this was released in February of 1991, issue 109. And it continued to be a rough issue in 110 as well. It was a pretty intense couple of issues. Definitely would recommend reading. So, would I recommend you going back to this series of Joes? Well, yeah, I would. You know, as I said, with today's climate of comics, maybe not all to your liking. And this was before Larry Hama seemed to went absolutely crazy, and how he hates people or disavows Comicsgate or whatever because he has a fundamental disagreement with them, which I don't understand why. But I digress. If you can get a hold of these for a good price, I would recommend doing it. I will warn you, the last several issues of this series are a bit hard to get and a bit pricey because the print runs on them were very low. So they're tough to get. But if you can, I would recommend it. Dive in and get ready for a good read of all these issues. There's a lot of comic books there to enjoy. Overall, the series was pretty strong throughout the most of part of it. As I said, there was a couple weak points. but that was okay. Even the weak points were readable and better than a lot of today's comic books. It was more violent, and it had more depth into it than the cartoons. So if you like the cartoons, you'll probably like this even more. So overall, for 156 issues, I recommend diving in and giving it a shot. And if you're wondering about the next segment, I think it goes up to 256 issues when IDW takes it over later on. Maybe I'll review that like this as well and tell you my thoughts on that. But overall, once again, if you enjoy comics with the armed forces, military, with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps working together as an elite group, G.I. Joe might be a great back issue series for you to grab. Because, you know, we don't like what happened to it most recently, right? Oh boy, it's a lot better than that garbage that we had under a different writer. And yes, I know Larry Hama's went crazy, but he actually had some very good stuff here. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit like, subscribe, hit that notifications bell. Let me know your thoughts. Did you read any G.I. Joe? Have you considered reading G.I. Joe? Do you plan on it? Also, you can buy Captain Frugal merchandise if you want, so you can get gifts like a Captain Frugal clock or shirts and things at CaptainFrugal.redbubble.com. CaptainFrugal.redbubble.com. I'll have the link in the info bar. So once again, please hit like, subscribe, spread the word about this channel if you don't mind. Help me out. I don't know if we're going to meet my goal. My goal is to hit 2,500 by the end of the year. I don't think I'm going to make it. But, you know, we're going to hit a good number. And none of this would be possible without you. Also, if you want to continue to help, you can go to the Patreon link down below in the info bar. You can join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, where you'll be supporting the channel and you'll be allowing me to get new materials and things to review. Currently, I'm working on my comic book, but I've hit a snag with the computer issue. I want to upgrade my computer so I can do better videos and highlight more independent comic makers. But I need a better computer to do it, so some of the funds look like they're going that way as well. And that's all thanks to you and your help making it possible. So until next time, keep it frugal.